He was born on December 15, 1969 in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. By the mid-1980s, Philly was building its own hip-hop empire, carving out space beneath the bright lights of New York. Cool C was right at the center of that movement. He was an original member of the Hilltop Hustlers, a local crew that included names like Steady B, DJ Tap Money, and 3 Times Dope. Together, they were pushing West Philly's agenda.
Yo, what's up? What's up, man? Yo, y'all see my new video, Glamorous Life, man? Stop it.
Cool C came out swinging, taking shots at the reigning empire. His 1987 debut single, Juice Crew Diss, was a bold move that directly targeted Marley Marl's legendary Juice Crew. It was a competitive shot at heavyweights like MC Shan and Big Daddy Kane, and it definitely got people talking. The buzz landed him a deal with Atlantic Records, and in 1989, he dropped his debut album, I Got a Habit. His biggest hit, Glamorous Life, climbed to number 11 on the national rap charts. Cool C lived that image to the fullest, riding around Philly in a decked-out SUV with the song's title painted on the side. He had the flashy style down to a science, pioneering the braggadocious East Coast rap look with big jewelry, fancy cars, and stacks of cash in his videos. But the fame didn't last. His 2 albums, I Got a Habit and Life in the Ghetto, made it onto the Billboard 200, but didn't sell like a major label had hoped. By the early 1990s, West Coast G-Funk was taking over, and Cool C's sound started to feel outdated. In 1991, hoping to reinvent himself, Cool C teamed up with fellow Philly rapper Steady B and Ultimate Ease to form the hardcore trio CEB, short for Countin' Endless Bank. Their 1993 single Get the Point did well, hitting number 5 on Billboard's Hot Rap Singles, but the album itself didn't move units. By 1996, the money had dried up. As one industry veteran once said, one of the hardest things in the world is being famous and broke. At 26, reportedly working on a comeback EP, Cool C made a desperate decision. On the morning of January 2, 1996, he, Steady B, and another local rapper, Ernest Mark Canty, attempted to rob a PNC Bank branch in Feltonville. The trio showed up dressed like construction workers and waited outside in a stolen minivan. Cool C and Canty stormed into the bank with automatic weapons, demanding cash. But a silent alarm was triggered almost immediately, alerting the police. They didn't get a single dollar. The first officer on the scene was Laretha Vaird, a 43-year-old police veteran and single mother of 2. As she entered the doorway, Roni opened fire with a MAC-10. Officer Vaird was hit in the abdomen and liver and died from her wounds. Reports later revealed she wasn't wearing the protective inserts in her bulletproof vest that day. As Cool C ran out, he exchanged shots with another officer before he and Canty ditched their guns and escaped in the stolen van, where Steady B was waiting behind the wheel. It didn't take long for investigators to connect the dots. The dropped weapons led police straight to Steady B. Within days, both he and Canty were arrested. Steady B later confessed to his role in the robbery, and his wife testified that all 3 men gathered at their apartment afterward to watch the news coverage of the crime. Cool C initially claimed an alibi backed by his mother, but after a warrant was issued, he turned himself in. The evidence stacked up quickly. Eyewitness accounts, ballistics, forensics, and surveillance footage all pointed to him. In 1996, a jury found him guilty on all counts, including first-degree murder. That December, Cool C was sentenced to death by lethal injection. His accomplices, Steady B and Mark Canty, received life sentences. The case made national headlines. Years later, Chuck D from Public Enemy commented that the government publicly executing its first rapper would look bad to the world.
These guys in the 80s were hot rappers. Like, what do you think led them to, their lives to get to the point of actually robbing a bank and, killing a police officer and everything?
Things change, man. It's hard to keep up with time. Times change or whatever, so you never know what people going through, their situation, their trials and tribulations, and their responsibilities sometimes drive them to do negative things, to feed their families or do whatever they got to do.
Cool C's execution has been postponed multiple times, first in 2006 by Governor Ed Rendell and again in 2014 by Governor Tom Corbett. Throughout his time on death row, Cool C has maintained his innocence. He converted to Islam while incarcerated and, in 2006, wrote that his mood remained strong, positive, and faithful as he continued to appeal for a new trial. Today, Christopher Roney remains behind bars at the State Correctional Institution Phoenix. The PNC Bank branch still operates, and a nearby Boys and Girls Club bears Officer Vaird's name in her memory. Real name, Warren Sabir McGlone. He was born on September 17, 1969, in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. He came up during the mid to late 1980s as part of the first wave of Philly hip-hop pioneers, standing shoulder to shoulder with names like Schoolie D and the Fresh Prince. But Warren wasn't just another rapper chasing fame. He was the face and driving force of the Hilltop Hustlers, a West Philly crew that became the city's backbone during hip-hop's early rise.
And I got my man Steady B right here from the old school, from the Hilltop.
Steady B defined his era, dropping 5 albums in quick succession between 1986 and 1991. His early records under the Pop Art label, including the breakout single Take Your Radio in 1985, made him one of the city's standout voices. By 1989, he hit his commercial peak with Going Steady, an album that climbed to number 25 on the top R&B/hip-hop albums chart. The title track took off, selling over 500,000 copies and earning gold status. For a Philly MC, it was a major win. But the industry was shifting fast. As the 1990s approached, rap's sound evolved and left many East Coast artists scrambling to keep up. To stay in the game, Steady B teamed up with his Hilltop partners, Cool C and Ultimate Ease, to form a hardcore trio called CEB in 1991. The name came from their initials, but also stood for Countin' Endless Bank, a nod to the money they hoped to make. The group landed a deal with Rough House Records and dropped Get the Point in 1993, a single that climbed to number 5 on Billboard's Hot Rap Singles chart.
Well, you know, CB, that's Cool C, DJ Ease, and myself, Steady B. As you all know, me and Cool been down for a while. I produced 2 albums that he had on Atlantic. I had 5 albums out on Job. So we came together, and we just came together just to give a public a new look. We decided to just make a group, CEB. That was our name.
Despite the buzz, the album didn't perform well. Sales were flat, and the dream of Endless Bank faded fast. By the mid-90s, both Steady B and Cool C were facing the harsh truth. They were famous, but broke. The pressure to maintain their image without the money to back it up pushed them toward desperate choices. What began as ambition soon spiraled into survival mode. The breaking point came on January 2, 1996. McGlone, along with Cool C and Ernest Mark Canty, plotted to rob a PNC bank in Feltonville, a working-class neighborhood in North Philadelphia. Cool C and Canty entered the bank dressed as construction workers and carrying automatic weapons, while Steady B waited outside in a stolen minivan, ready to drive the getaway. The robbery went wrong almost instantly. A silent alarm alerted police before they could grab any money. The first officer to arrive was Laretha Vaird, a 43-year-old mother of 2 and a respected 9-year veteran of the force. As she stepped into the doorway, Cool C opened fire with a MAC-10, striking and killing her. She became the first female Philadelphia police officer killed in the line of duty. Roney exchanged shots with another officer before fleeing, leaving their guns, including the murder weapon, behind as they sped off in the van driven by Steady B. Investigators quickly connected the dots. The dropped weapons were traced back to Steady B, leading police straight to his apartment. When confronted with the evidence, McGlone broke down and confessed. He admitted to his role as the getaway driver and gave up details about Roney and Canty's involvement. At trial, the prosecution brought forward heavy evidence, including testimony from Steady B's wife, Lynette Medley. She told the court that the men met at their apartment right after the robbery to watch the televised news about the shooting and discuss what to do next. Canty's statements backed up her story, leaving little doubt about what happened. On October 30th, 1996, Steady B was convicted of second-degree murder, bank robbery, and grand larceny. On December 13th, he was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Cool C received a death sentence for first-degree murder, while Canty was also handed life. Steady B, once one of the artists who helped put Philly hip-hop on the map, now lives out his days behind bars at SCI Houtsdale in Pennsylvania. Corey Miller was born on March 9, 1971, in uptown New Orleans, Louisiana, growing up in the rough Calliope projects. The area was known for its violence and chaos, the kind of place that shaped kids early. During the 1990s and early 2000s, New Orleans was nicknamed the murder capital of the United States, and Calliope was one of the hardest spots in the city. But Miller wasn't just another product of the block. After high school, he took a different route and joined the U.S. Army, where he served as a combat medic during the Gulf War, hoping to build a life outside the struggle.
Y'all want to see New Orleans? This New Orleans. Third Wall, projects, you heard me? Everything up there. We got the Calio.
When he returned home in the early 1990s, the music wave sweeping through New Orleans was impossible to ignore. His older brother, Percy Miller, better known as Master P, was already building a movement with No Limit Records. Corey soon joined him, rapping under the name C Murder, and became one of the standout voices of the label. He was part of TRU, the family's rap supergroup, short for The Real Untouchables, which laid the groundwork for No Limit's explosive run in hip-hop. By the late 1990s, C Murder had turned himself into one of the biggest names on the roster. His debut album, Life or Death, dropped in 1998 and went platinum. He followed it up with Bossellini in 1999 and Trapped in Crime in 2000, both of which went gold. Down for My Ends, from the Trapped in Crime album, became his signature hit and a street anthem that still echoes through clubs today. He also tried acting, showing up in No Limit's hood movies like Da Game of Life and Hot Boys. On the surface, C Murder was living every rapper's dream: money, cars, fame, and family success. But even with everything going right, he couldn't fully detach from the streets that made him. Friends and family, including Master P, often said C Murder had a deep loyalty to his neighborhood. He refused to turn his back on old friends or the environment that raised him. That loyalty, while noble, turned out to be the thing that pulled him down.
I'm just like them. See what I'm saying? Ain't no motherfucker coming back, never left. Shit be with you. Taking out the hood, you can't take the hood out the.
Trouble started catching up fast in 2001. On the night of August 14th that year, C Murder and his crew went to Club Rags in Baton Rouge. When a security guard tried to search him, he refused. The club owner stepped in with a gun and told him he couldn't come in. Things escalated. C Murder pulled out a semi-automatic pistol and tried to shoot, but the gun jammed after one round. Luckily, no one got hit. He later turned himself in, was charged with attempted first-degree murder, and got out on bond. Barely 6 months later, things took an even darker turn. On January 12, 2002, Miller and his entourage showed up at the Platinum Club in Harvey, Louisiana, where a rap contest was happening. Among the performers was 16-year-old Steve Thomas, a fan of C Murder. At some point, a bump or small scuffle broke out between Thomas and someone in Miller's crew. What started as a minor altercation spiraled into chaos. Thomas was beaten and then shot once in the chest. He died on the spot.
I grabbed Corey. I'm like, chill, big dog. So he's like, all right, cool, big dog, cool. But he went back to fighting. So when he went back to fighting, I heard that pow.
Steve Thomas was just lying there in a pool of blood. He ended up dying from a single gunshot wound to the heart.
6 days later, C Murder was arrested at the House of Blues for a minor disturbance, but investigators soon connected him to the Platinum Club killing. By February 2002, he was indicted for second-degree murder. The legal process that followed dragged on for years. He was first convicted in 2003, but a year later, the judge overturned the verdict, ruling that prosecutors had hidden evidence that could have helped the defense. In 2006, Miller was released and placed on house arrest while awaiting retrial. During that period, he stayed productive, releasing new music and trying to rebuild his reputation. But his past continued to haunt him. In March 2009, just before the retrial, he pleaded no contest to the Baton Rouge shooting case from 2001, taking a 10-year sentence with credit for time already served. In August 2009, his retrial for the murder of Steve Thomas began. Witnesses for the prosecution included a club security guard named Darnell Jordan, who claimed he saw a flash from C. Murder's hand, and another man, Kenneth Jordan, who picked him out from a photo lineup.
They're like, who do you know in these pictures? I'm like, that's C. Murder. Okay, sign the back. So I signed the back. Not one time did it say, C. Murder the killer, sign the back.
On August 10th, the jury said they were deadlocked. The judge ordered them to keep deliberating, and they eventually came back with a controversial 10-2 guilty verdict. One juror later admitted she changed her vote after feeling pressured by others. 4 days later, C. Murder was sentenced to life in prison without parole. Since then, his case has been surrounded by controversy. In 2018, both Kenneth and Darnell Jordan recanted their testimonies, saying police and prosecutors had coerced them. Kenneth even signed an affidavit stating detectives threatened him with a 10-year sentence if he didn't name C. Murder as the shooter.
Trying to pressure me. I never seen a gun, never, ever. When I pulled Corey from the fight, his hands like this, no weapon, none.
Still, without new evidence, courts refused to overturn the verdict, calling the recantations unreliable. In 2023, a federal judge upheld the conviction once again. C. Murder has always maintained his innocence. Over the years, his fight for freedom has attracted support from major figures like Kim Kardashian and civil rights attorney Ben Crump. In 2021, he went on a hunger strike to protest prison conditions and what he called injustice in his case. That same year, he released an album titled Give Me Freedom or Give Me Death, continuing to create from behind bars. Today, Corey Miller remains in the Louisiana State Penitentiary, still holding on to hope through his 3 daughters and the ongoing efforts to clear his name. The streets of Brooklyn raised Ronald Herron, born March 30th, 1982. Growing up in the Gowanus houses with his mother, he saw the city's hardest side up close. When he was just 12, he watched a close friend get shot and killed by a police officer. 2 years later, he was arrested for armed robbery and spent 4 years at Rikers Island, learning early what it meant to survive in a place built on chaos. Herron was more than another young man swallowed by the system. Over time, he rose to become the reputed leader of a Bloods faction known as the Murderous Mad Dogs. The crew dominated parts of Borum Hill, controlling drug corners in the Gowanus and Wyckoff housing projects while running extortion, robbery, and murder-for-hire operations that turned the area into a danger zone.
I was brought up toting slammers, like, so my belt had to be extra tight. You feel me?
After his release from prison in July 2007, Herron decided to chase something different. He took on the name Raw Diggs and threw himself into music. Between 2007 and 2010, he made a name in Brooklyn's growing gangsta rap scene, working with artists like Uncle Murda and Waka Flocka Flame. Together, they formed a collective called the Murda Team. Raw Diggs' raw style and street authenticity made him a rising star. His YouTube channel gained a following, and one of his videos, Eulogy, eventually crossed over 1 million views. But separating the rapper from the gangster proved impossible. His lyrics and lifestyle blurred together, and before long, the same street energy that fueled his music started dragging him down. In 2010, he got into a heated altercation with rapper Jim Jones at a studio. Word spread that Raw Diggs and a few of his people followed Jones to a nightclub later that night and tried to ambush him. Nothing came of it, but the story showed just how close the violence and fame had grown. Herron's world was built on loyalty, intimidation, and power, and by then, he had crossed deep into the underworld. Federal investigators later linked him to a series of killings tied to the Murderous Mad Dogs. The bodies started to tell a story. The first was Frederick Brooks, shot and killed in June 2001 during a turf dispute. Herron was arrested for the crime but beat the charge in court after witnesses changed their stories, something prosecutors later said happened because they were threatened. The second was Richard Russo, killed in May 2008 inside an elevator at the Wyckoff Gardens projects. The third, Victor Zapata, died in 2009 after being chased and shot in the same housing complex. By October 2010, the pressure closed in. Police caught Herron outside a nightclub with a gun and body armor in his car, charging him with drug and weapons offenses. That arrest kicked off a massive federal case that hit him with 21 charges, including 3 murders, narcotics trafficking, and racketeering under the RICO Act. The government painted Raw Diggs as the face of organized street violence. His trial in 2014 became infamous for how prosecutors used his music against him. They played his rap videos in court, insisting they were not just songs, but actual confessions and coded messages about the gang's crimes. In June 2014, the jury convicted him on all counts.
The music is basically us talking about the life that we come from, not necessarily saying this is what I did. You know, this is a very intelligent man, and this is not a man who would commit all these crimes and didn't tell you for you to use it against him.
They allege that Heron is guilty of racketeering charges for running a drug dealing operation in the Gowanus housing development where he grew up. They also claim he was involved in 3 murders and 3 attempted murders.
When he stood before the judge for sentencing in April 2015, Heron stayed defiant. He called out the government's case, saying they twisted his image into something monstrous. He told the court that even an inexperienced prosecutor could have won the trial with the amount of bias built into it. The judge wasn't moved. Heron was sentenced to 12 life terms plus another 105 years. He laughed at the sentence, telling the court it didn't matter because he could only die once. Heron appealed, arguing that using his lyrics as evidence violated his right to free expression. But the court rejected his claim in 2019, ruling the music was fair game. Today, Raw Diggs is locked inside ADX Florence in Colorado, one of the most secure prisons in America. He spends 23 hours a day in isolation, with only 1 hour for exercise in a small cage. Born on November 19, 1974, Gerald Coleman was raised by his grandmother in the James Weldon Johnson housing projects in Manhattan. He earned his stage name G-Dep, short for Ghetto Dependent, a name that spoke volumes about his roots and his reliance on the streets that shaped him. His natural talent gave him a way out, at least for a time. After putting in work with early singles on the Tape Kings label, his big opportunity finally arrived. In 1998, Coleman met Sean Combs, better known as Diddy, and landed a huge $350,000 5-album deal with Bad Boy Records. Almost overnight, G-Dep became part of the Bad Boy movement. He appeared on records alongside Black Rob and quickly started building momentum. His debut solo album, Child of the Ghetto, dropped in 2001, breaking into the Billboard 200 and climbing to number 23 on the R&B and hip-hop chart. The project delivered his biggest hit, Special Delivery, which peaked at number 3 on the Hot Rap Singles chart and turned him into one of the label's fresh new faces. G-Dep had reached the dream, but the pull of the same environment that made him never fully left. After his first album, Coleman's world began to unravel. He battled addiction, mainly to PCP, and the drug took him on a spiral that lasted years. His life became a blur of arrests and relapses, more than 25 of them between 2003 and 2010 for drug possession, burglary, and theft. He tried to turn things around, going through drug treatment programs and joining Narcotics Anonymous, hoping to start over. He even released new music months before everything changed. But the past kept chasing him, and eventually, it caught up. For nearly 2 decades, guilt had been eating away at him. On December 15, 2010, Coleman, now 36, walked into the 25th precinct in Harlem, not to report a crime or face a new charge, but to confess to something he had done 17 years earlier. He told detectives that back in October 1993, he tried to rob a man outside the Johnson houses. When the man fought back and grabbed his gun, Coleman pulled away and fired 3 shots into the man's chest before fleeing on a bicycle and tossing the weapon into the East River. He said he never knew if the man had survived.
Then he like grabbed the gun. It was kind of like a struggle, and I pulled the gun back from him, and then I fired 3 times.
Detectives were stunned, but his story lined up perfectly with an old unsolved case. The victim was John Henkel, a 32-year-old man shot 3 times with a .40 caliber gun on that same Harlem corner in October 1993. The details matched, right down to the neighborhood and type of weapon. Coleman said he came forward because the memory had been haunting him, and he wanted to make peace with himself and with God. He had even tried to confess twice before, but both times officers thought he was high and didn't take him seriously. Even with his confession, the case wasn't straightforward. He was charged with second-degree murder in January 2011, but his lawyer, Anthony Rico, argued that Coleman might have gotten the wrong case. He remembered the shooting happening in a different month and described the victim differently from the real one. Despite those details, Coleman refused a plea deal that would have guaranteed him 15 years to life. The trial played out the following year. In April 2012, he was found guilty of second-degree murder, and by May, he was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison. His lawyer said that, whatever the outcome, Coleman's act was one of the strongest statements any rapper of his generation could make, accepting responsibility for what he had done instead of running from it. The conviction was later upheld in court. Henkel's family finally got a sense of closure after years of not knowing who had taken their brother's life. Coleman's confession became a major talking point in legal circles about cold cases and the power of conscience. Many saw it as one of the rare times someone voluntarily turned themselves in for an old crime without any outside pressure. For years, G-Dep sat in prison, but nearly 13 years later, the story took an unexpected turn. In December 2023, New York Governor Kathy Hochul commuted his sentence, acknowledging the unusual nature of his confession and rehabilitation. By April 2024, G-Dep was officially released, stepping out after more than a decade behind bars. Born on September 15, 1976, in Dallas, Texas, Antron Singleton's story began in a surprisingly gentle way. As a kid, he was drawn to creativity, writing poetry at just 7 years old. But as he grew older and found his place in the music world, the young poet gave way to Big Lurch, a name that would come to define something far darker. His music reflected the aggression and menace of Southern hip-hop and the eerie subculture of horrorcore, a style known for its extreme imagery and violent themes. Singleton's first real step into rap came when he joined the group Cosmic Slop Shop. They released their album Da Family in 1998, giving him his first taste of success. When the group split the following year, Singleton went solo, diving fully into his darker persona. His lyrics got heavier, more violent, and his sound took on a sinister edge that stood out even in the hardcore rap landscape. But while he was making a name in underground circles, his personal life was spiraling into something much darker. His solo career was short, but it would forever be tied to one of the most disturbing crimes in hip-hop history. Everything changed on April 10, 2002. Singleton, who was 25 at the time, committed an act of violence so shocking that it instantly became headline news. In the Los Angeles apartment he shared with his friend and her boyfriend, he brutally murdered his 21-year-old roommate, Tynesha Isaias. The scene was beyond comprehension. When friends arrived later that night, they found Isaias dead, her chest torn open. Evidence showed extreme force had been used in the attack, and part of a knife blade was lodged inside her back. The medical exam later revealed teeth marks on her face and that her lungs had been ripped from her chest. The horror didn't end there. Witnesses said Singleton was found naked, drenched in blood, and standing motionless in the middle of the street, staring blankly into the sky. It was immediately clear this wasn't a calculated murder, but the result of a drug-fueled psychotic break. He had been using PCP heavily, and investigators later determined that the drug had triggered a violent state of delirium. A post-arrest examination made the story even more gruesome when doctors discovered human tissue inside his stomach that didn't belong to him.
But a mother named Carolyn thinks about what happened to her daughter.
And I feel everyone should know what happened to her because it was a brutal murder. He chewed a part of her intestines.
At his trial, Singleton's defense argued that he was not in his right mind, claiming insanity brought on by drug use. But under California law, voluntary intoxication cannot be used as a defense for insanity, even when it leads to psychosis. The judge rejected the plea, and in June 2003, Singleton was found guilty of murder and aggravated mayhem. A few months later, on November 7th, he was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The story didn't end with the criminal case. In 2003, Tynesha Isaias' mother filed a wrongful death lawsuit against Singleton, his bodyguard, and several record labels, including Stress Free Records and initially Death Row Records. Her lawyers argued that these companies helped create and profit from the violent image that surrounded Big Lurch, even going so far as to suggest that he had been encouraged to take drugs to fit the gangsta rap mold. The claim alleged that record labels pushed artists to live the violent lifestyles they rapped about, believing it made them more authentic and marketable. Death Row Records denied any connection to Singleton and was eventually removed from the lawsuit, but the case drew attention to how the industry profited from extreme personas. Today, Singleton remains incarcerated at California State Prison in Los Angeles County, serving a life sentence without the chance of parole. His case continues to be cited in legal and psychological discussions, often used as an example of how substance abuse can destroy both the individual and those around them. Anna-Ray Vashon Brown was born on July 30, 1974, and raised on the south side of Sacramento, California. The area shaped his identity, and much of his family was tied to the Garden Block Crips. For Brown, the streets were part of his DNA. Still, he wasn't just a product of his surroundings. He was a sharp kid with an ear for rhythm, studying lyrics and mimicking his heroes. Inspired by West Coast legends like Ice Cube and Dr. Dre, Brown began crafting his own style, eventually seeing himself as a kind of disciple to Dre's approach to rap. He started performing under the name X-Rated, a moniker that came from one of his own explicit lyrics. In his late teens, he linked up with producer brother Lynch Hung and joined a local crew called the Hilltop Hustlers, who were determined to make Sacramento stand out in a hip-hop scene still dominated by New York. In 1991, he dropped his first EP, and the following year, his debut album Psychoactive hit the streets. It was also the first release from Black Market Records, a label that would become a cornerstone of independent West Coast rap. X-Rated quickly became a major figure in the city's music scene, earning local celebrity status. His influence ran so deep that even Dr. Dre reportedly tried to buy the Black Market name, proof of the movement he helped spark.
My album, Psychoactive, ended up becoming the first album ever released by Black Market Records. I'm like the LL Cool J of Black Market Records.
And when Dr. Dre left Death Row and he was trying to start his new label, he actually tried to buy the Black Market name.
But the same raw energy that fueled his music soon dragged him into something much darker. At just 17, Brown was arrested in connection with the gang-related killing of Patricia Harris during a home invasion in 1989. The case against him was aggressive and unconventional. Because he was a minor, the first battle was over whether he'd be tried as an adult. He lost that fight, and prosecutors pushed hard to convict him under the felony murder rule, which held that anyone involved in a felony that leads to a death could be charged equally with first-degree murder, even if they weren't the one who pulled the trigger. The prosecution didn't stop there. They took an unprecedented step by turning his music into evidence. They used the cover art from Psychoactive, where X-Rated posed with a gun, claiming it was the same weapon used in the crime, though no gun was ever recovered. Prosecutors also pulled lines from his lyrics, painting them as literal confessions of murder, and even twisted song titles to make them sound more incriminating. In court and in the press, they built a narrative of X-Rated as a gang leader who rapped about real killings, and the story stuck. Despite maintaining his innocence, Brown was found guilty in 1992 and sentenced to 31 years to life in prison. He had lost his freedom, but he refused to lose his voice. From behind bars, he continued to make music, recording more than a dozen albums while incarcerated. With limited access to equipment, he used a metronome to keep time and rapped through payphones, keeping his creativity alive through sheer determination. His music evolved from anger to reflection, documenting his transformation as he grappled with the consequences of his past and the system that condemned him. Prison life came with its own dangers too. In 2010, he was stabbed 7 times after refusing to record an album for a prison gang.
Well, you got stabbed multiple times.
Yeah, I did get stabbed, yeah.
And now this is in the middle of the hope at the end of the, you see, there's a light at the end of the tunnel. From what I understand, you were essentially approached to help put out some music from somebody in prison, and you said no.
Around that same time, the state tried to seize his royalties under the Son of Sam law, which prevents criminals from profiting off their crimes. But the California Supreme Court overturned that law, allowing him to keep creating and earning from his art. After serving 26 years, X-Rated finally walked free on September 14, 2018. His parole came with unlikely support from Lyle and Eric Menendez, who he'd befriended in prison. The brothers had challenged him to focus his energy on personal growth, and Brown credits them with helping him prepare mentally and spiritually for life after incarceration. Since regaining his freedom, Brown has devoted himself to something greater than music. Signing with Strange Music in 2022, he's been focused on advocacy, using his platform to inspire others to stay out of the system and push for reform. He's also been outspoken about the way prosecutors used his art against him, pointing to new laws like California's AB 2799, the Decriminalizing Artistic Expression Act, which now prohibits using lyrics or imagery as factual evidence in court. He argues that if this law had existed during his trial, his album art and lyrics would have never been allowed as evidence, and his entire case might have turned out differently. Today, he continues to speak about justice, reform, and the same social issues that once trapped him in the system.